I'm Miss Sarah, and this is At Home Makerspace, where every week I show you how to make fun projects with things you can find at home. This is our first of two videos all about chocolate. In this week's video, I'll be showing you how you can make your own custom mold to make chocolates in some fun shapes. If you're not familiar with molds, they are hollow containers that you can pour a liquid into, and when the liquid hardens, it's in the same shape as your container. Molds are not only used to make chocolates, but also candles, soaps, and even copies of dinosaur fossils. In this video, I will be using this Lego to make a custom mold that will allow us to make some Lego-shaped chocolates. So, let's get started. The first thing you'll need to make this project is some chocolate, of course. You can make this project using chocolate bars, chocolate chips, or chocolate candies. You can also choose if you want your chocolate to be milk chocolate, semi-sweet, dark, or maybe even white chocolate. Chocolate melts best when you're melting small, evenly sized pieces. So, if you're using a chocolate bar or chocolate candies, I would recommend that you or a grown-up cut it into small chocolate chip sized pieces like this. Once your chocolate has been picked and prepped, it's time to start melting it. I'm actually going to share two different ways that you can melt chocolate. But before I do, a quick safety reminder. Both the chocolate and the container you melt it in can get quite hot, so be very careful, and some of you may want to ask a grown-up for some help with this part. Okay, so the first method I'm going to show you is how to melt chocolate using a microwave. To melt chocolate in the microwave, you'll want to start by putting your chocolate pieces in a microwave-safe bowl. You'll want to heat it very slowly and at a low temperature. So place your bowl inside the microwave, then set your microwave for 30 seconds at 50% power. After 30 seconds, remove the bowl and stir the chocolate chips. Then put it back in the microwave for another 30 seconds at 50% power. Remember to keep stirring and putting it in the microwave at 30-second increments until all your chocolate is melted. When it's done, it should be nice and smooth, like this. The second way to melt chocolate is by melting it in a double boiler or other heat-safe bowl over some water that's been boiled on the stove. Here's how to do it. For this method, heat a pot of water over the stove until it begins to steam. Then place a double boiler or heat-safe bowl on top. Make sure the bottom of this bowl is above the boiling water. You don't want it to be sitting in the water. Now add your chocolate pieces. The heat from the steam will warm up the bowl, and the warm bowl will melt the chocolate. Make sure to stir the chocolate to help make sure everything melts evenly. After a minute or two, the chocolate should be completely smooth and melted. When you're ready to use your chocolate, I recommend making a little nest out of a towel and nestling your chocolate bowl inside. This towel will protect your table from the hot bowl, it'll keep your bowl from tipping, and it'll keep the bowl warm and the chocolate melted. If you're trying to decide which method you should use to melt your chocolate, I would say you should pick the method that you're most comfortable with. If you're comfortable with both methods, then I do think melting the chocolate in a double boiler does keep it melted and liquidy longer than melting it in a microwave. So it sort of depends on how you plan to use your chocolate. If you plan to use all of your chocolate very quickly, then the microwave method should be just fine. But if you plan to make multiple chocolates using the same mold and will need your chocolate to stay melted for a longer period of time, then the double boiler method might be the choice for you. And now that I've shown you how to melt your chocolate, here's everything else you'll need to make a chocolate mold. To make your mold, you'll need some soft brown sugar, a small bowl, a spoon, and a small object to make your mold. I'm going to be using a Lego. And don't forget, you'll need some melted chocolate. The first thing you'll need to do is scoop some soft brown sugar into a small bowl. You'll want to make sure that it's at least as deep as the object that you're going to be using to make your mold. Using the back of your spoon, or even your fingers, press down on the brown sugar until it is firmly packed. Now, grab the object you'll be using to make your mold. I'll be using this Lego. So I'm turning it upside down, then pressing gently into the brown sugar. And now you can see it's left an imprint that looks an awful lot like that Lego. Next, you'll want to spoon the melted chocolate into your mold. What worked best for me was adding the chocolate in a few small spoonfuls rather than one great big spoonful. My chocolate had also started to cool, and so it was rather thick, which made it a little trickier to work with. If you're having this problem as well, you can always reheat your chocolate, and this should help to make it thinner and easier to work with. Okay, so now my mold is all filled with chocolate. So I'm going to smooth the top of my chocolate to make it as flat as I can. And when I'm all done, this is what it should look like. Place it in your refrigerator or freezer until the chocolate hardens. And when your chocolate has hardened, you can simply lift it from the mold. Don't worry, it will have some brown sugar sticking to it, and that's what it looks like. To clear off the brown sugar, you can start by gently sweeping it away with your fingers. Next, you can use a toothpick to help remove more of the brown sugar. And finally, you can run your chocolate under cold water. Make sure it's cold, you don't want your chocolate to melt. And here's my cleaned chocolate. And what's the final step of making chocolates? Tasting it, of course. So now that I knew you could use a brown sugar mold to make Lego-shaped chocolates, I wanted to see what other objects you could use to make chocolate. So I asked the members of our library's Tween interest group for some help. The Tweens tested out this project with lots of different objects to see what would work well, and here's what they made. After trying this project at home, the Tweens also had some tips they'd like to share with you. You can overcook your chocolate if you don't set the power to 50%. So if you don't know how to set the power to 50%, try putting your chocolate in the microwave for less time. Try 10 or 15 seconds at a time rather than 30 seconds. If you're making multiple molds in one container, put all of your objects in the brown sugar first, then remove them one by one. If you try to make a mold, then remove it, then make another mold, you might accidentally mess up the first mold you made. The tweens and I all had some trouble with the bottoms of our chocolate being a bit lumpy, so here are some ideas we came up with. Make sure to smooth your chocolate when it's in the mold, and you can always cut off the extra chocolate from the bottom once it's hardened. And finally, I had a few tweens try using long, thin objects like a lollipop or crayons, or even a figurine with a thin neck, and those cracked when they tried to take them out, so be very careful or don't use long, thin objects to make your molds. I'd like to thank the volunteers for their help with this video. If you'd like to learn more about becoming a member of our library's Tween interest group, be sure to stay tuned until the end of the video. Finally, since we knew that brown sugar would work to make a mold, I was curious if anything else in the kitchen would work. So I decided to pair 3 other powders you can find in the kitchen against some brown sugar to see if brown sugar was really the best. I'll be testing bread flour, soft brown sugar, unsweetened cocoa powder, and cornstarch. Place all of your powders in small containers, then grab the object you'll be using for your mold. Pack and flatten your powder in the container, then gently press your object into the powder. When your object has been pressed all the way in, gently remove it from the powder. And now we're going to repeat that with all of our other powders. To make this experiment more consistent, I recommend using either the same object or identical objects to make all of your molds. So here I am using the same size Lego brick for making all of my molds. Using the same or identical objects will make it easier to compare our final product and see how each powder did. Now take a moment to examine all of your molds. Which ones have the clearest impression of your object? I thought that the brown sugar had the clearest impression. Therefore, I think the brown sugar will make the best mold. Take notes, and then it's time to add our chocolate. Grab your bowl of melted chocolate and begin to fill each of the molds. Once again, I recommend using small spoonfuls to fill your molds. Remember to smooth the top of your chocolates as much as you can, and then place your chocolate molds in the refrigerator until the chocolate hardens. Once the chocolate has hardened, you can remove the chocolates from the molds. Try to wipe off as much of the extra powder as you can. Start by trying to gently wipe this powder off with your fingers. You can then try gently scraping it with a toothpick. Finally, you can try running your chocolates under cold water. But this cold water trick won't work for every powder. And once your chocolates are all clean, it's time to take a closer look and maybe a taste. The cornstarch didn't do a very good job of catching the details. You can barely see the 8 little bumps in the top of my Lego. You can also see a little leftover cornstarch, which I couldn't clean off. So now let's test the chocolate molded with cornstarch. Still tastes like chocolate, and you can't really taste the cornstarch. The cocoa powder also didn't do a good job of getting those details. You can sort of see where those 8 bumps might be, but when I tried cleaning the cocoa powder with water, it turned into a paste, So there's lots of leftover cocoa powder stuck to my chocolate. So now let's test the chocolate molded with the unsweetened cocoa powder. You can taste a little bit of the powder, but it just makes it taste a little bit more like dark chocolate. The brown sugar actually did a pretty good job. You can clearly see all 8 of those bumps. And while there's still some leftover brown sugar and the texture is a bit bumpy, I think overall brown sugar did a good job making a mold. Now let's test the chocolate molded with brown sugar. There's a little extra crunch from the sugar, but it works really well with the chocolate. And finally, the bread flour. The bread flour also didn't do a very good job of getting the details. You can barely see the 8 bumps. It's not as good as brown sugar, but maybe a little better than cornstarch. And now let's test the chocolate molded with bread flour. Can't really taste the flour on this one. That's good. If I were to rank the powders, brown sugar was the best, bread flour was the next best, cornstarch was the third best, and cocoa powder was the worst. So all in all the powders made a pretty tasty chocolate. But if you want a chocolate that looks like the object you used to make your mold, I'd recommend using brown sugar. Now, if you try this experiment at home, feel free to try some different powders and let me know if you find something that works even better than brown sugar. We hope you enjoyed learning how to make your own custom chocolate molds with brown sugar. If you make your own chocolates, we'd love to see it, so please take a picture and share it with us at the library. You can do so through our Facebook at www.facebook.com/FHCPL, through our Instagram. Our handle is at FHCPL, or you can send us an email. Our email address is makerspace@finleylibrary.org. If you'd like to learn even more fun things you can do with chocolate at home, be sure to tune in next week for our second chocolate video. See you then. Bye. If you're still watching, you're probably interested in learning more about our library's Tween interest group. Well, this is a volunteer group for 4th, 5th, and 6th graders who volunteer 2 hours a month at the library. They help us plan programs, run programs, recommend books, and lots more fun stuff. So, if you're interested in becoming a member of our library's Tween interest group, stop by the children's desk or send me an email at makerspace@finleylibrary.org, and we'll be happy to get you the application.